Greetings chaps, Stuart Charles here, HomeStudioBasics.com, helping you make sound decisions leading to a beautiful audio experience that will make you fall in love with music all over again. So, let's get right into the creative SoundBlasterX G6 headphone gaming amp DAC review. Wow, that was a mouthful. Big shout out to Creative for sending me this amp DAC. I'm not being compensated by them, just giving my honest review and opinions / impressions. So first off, let's discuss build. Holding this in your hand, it's a little bit underwhelming, but it's a minor complaint. I mean, it comes in at around 139 grams or 4.7 ounces. It's got a brushed aluminum look, but it's built mostly of plastic. The cool thing is on the bottom, you've got this really nice rubber type of pad. Feels really good to the touch, and it ensures that your little baby doesn't move when it's on your desk or wherever. So I really like that little feature. The volume knob feels pretty good to turn, the volume potentiometer. Press it once to mute, but you can also hold it for 2 seconds and it will enter mic mode, which is what you'll want to use if you're gaming with a headset or a microphone attached, and we'll get into that in a bit. So yeah, on the front we've got the 3.5mm headphone jack, pretty standard, and on the right side there's the microphone jack. So basically, if you're using a headset with a built-in mic, you're just going to use the left side. A headphone with something like the V-Moda Boom Pro, you'll also use the left side, as the V-Moda Boom Pro replaces 3.5 termination on your headphones. So think SHP 9500, you would replace the 3.5mm jack, plug in the V-Moda Boom Pro into it, and then the other end would just plug into the left side of the G6. Also, a headphone with the Antlion Mod Mic wireless would plug straight into the left side, as you don't need a separate jack going into the mic input. So for the 3.5mm mic input, with the Mod Mic 5 you'd use the right side. So the Mod Mic 5, you have to use 2 separate cables, one for the audio and one for the mic. So all updates for the gaming portion with a headset will be in the review, so check that link out down below. The only thing I didn't get to try with this was the microphone, because I don't currently have a mic for competitive gaming. On the back we've got the optical / line out, and optical / line in, and of course the micro USB jack. So for Xbox users, you will have to use the line in feature and the hybrid optical / line cable that comes in the package. For the line in, you can also connect it with a Blu-ray player and a Nintendo Switch, your tablet, or any other mobile device. So pretty versatile there. Gosh, dude, this guy. While we're waiting, let's talk about what's in the box, which I forgot to mention. So you get the amp DAC, obviously, a USB Type-C cable, a hybrid optical line cable, a startup guidance, and miscellaneous paperwork. So let's get right back into what we were talking about before. Yeah, so for the optical line out, you'll use it with separate speakers or an amplifier. And of course, micro USB, just plug it into your PC, laptop, and your PS4. Now this is my favorite feature because I have a PS4, but so you can basically, I'm so super excited right now. You can basically plug this thing right into the front of your PS4 and it will be instantly recognized. You don't have to go fiddling in with the settings. You don't have to use an optical cable. You can also use this thing with a phone. Now, I was able to use mine with a 3.5mm interconnect, but just keep in mind that it still needs bus power to operate. So if you wanted to, you can also use a micro USB to micro USB, but keep in mind, if you do that, you will be draining your battery's phone. Strike that, reverse it, your phone's battery. It will still work, but the way I did it kind of defeats the purpose, but I just wanted to see if it would work with a 3.5mm line with my phone and plugged into my PC. So let's get into some of the features on the side. Now these are some of the best selling points for this amp DAC. So first off, we have Scalp Mode, which is probably my favorite feature here. So Scalp Mode basically improves soundstage. It spaces things out better. It gives the games, the movies, your music a little bit better imaging, spacing, detail. immersion, clarity, resolution. Insert word salad term here. So I found that I was using Scalp Mode with this thing for the majority of the time. Like, I prefer to have it on. Some people, like, your mileage may vary. So I found that it just happens to work really well for whatever I'm listening to at any given time. And I prefer to have it on. So the second feature is SBX mode. This basically toggles surround sound profile. It is Dolby Digital supported, so it will decode Dolby Digital. Now the G5 did not. We'll get into some of the differences between those two in a bit, but I really do like SBX, but I think I prefer Scalp Mode over it. SBX, it provided a more subtle difference in the music, whereas Scalp Mode, there's a clear difference in spacing and immersion. So thirdly, we have the gain switch. This is also really great because this thing packs a lot of power. If this amp DAC were a person, it would be like Will Ferrell on steroids. We're good, streaky! Yes! Creative claims that this will power 600 ohm headphones, and I wouldn't doubt it. For 300 ohm headphones like this HD600 with about 97 dB of sensitivity, you're going to want to use high gain, although you can use the HD600 on low gain. You'll just be turning it up a little bit more, but with high gain, there's plenty of headroom either way. I would say, like, for a headphone like the Philips SHP 9500, you're not going to want to use high gain. It'll be fine on low, as those types of headphones are very efficient and or have a low impedance and don't need a lot of power from an amp. So I would definitely feel comfortable driving anything with this thing, which is another huge selling point. So, but wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more.
The X amp feature, now this is pretty cool, as it's there's a separate amplifier for each channel. So say if you're gaming and you hear an explosion, the amp's not going to overcompensate by taking some power from the right channel and putting it on the left. So that's a really cool feature as well. And lastly, we have SoundBlaster Connect. This is actually one of my favorite things about this amp. Just go to blasterx.com/software and follow the prompts. The X on the top of the unit, you can change colors to any color you like, basically. So there's solo presets, music reactive, pulsate, and cycle. I prefer mine on cycle, very low, because you can see all the different colors of the spectrum. Just an interesting, cool feature. Not going to make or break your decision, but I really did enjoy messing around with that. Definitely check the review below, because I did like a 12-minute demo of it, and I think you guys will really enjoy that. Had a lot of fun with that as well, so not going to get too much more into I waited for you. We're just gonna wait. Why? So yeah, with SoundBlaster Connect, with SoundBlaster Connect, it definitely had an impact on my SHP 9500. I was able to kind of tame down that upper mid low treble area without having to use a separate EQ like piece or anything like that. I do have piece on my computer, but this is just really convenient. So now that built-in features are out of the way, what about the sound of this thing? Now, for my sources here, I use Tidal Hi-Fi, Spotify Premium, my PS4, and Netflix and Chill Dog. For headphones, I use the SHP 9500, the AKG K702, the K612, and the Sony HD600, or 100 if you're white. For movies and gaming, I mostly use the K702 and K612, and for music, I was mostly listening with the 600s and the 9500. Support for this thing is 32-bit 384K, so you're not gonna have to worry. You can pretty much utilize any files that you have, any audio files, because we're audiophiles with an F. First off, it's an amp DAC all-in-one combo. You can also refer to it as an external sound card versus the internal one that some people like to use inside of custom-built PCs. I'll link you guys a video in an article that I wrote about that if you're a little bit new, if you want to know what a DAC does, etc. So first off, what was really interesting First off, what was really interesting, well, so first off, what was really interesting about this amp DAC is that it has a output impedance of 1, so not entirely neutral. Definitely not warm. It kind of strikes a really nice balance between the two. I didn't find it overly warm or syrupy. Definitely not sterile, crisp, and neutral like a Magni, an O2, an Objective 2, an NX4, or an Atom. But there's a nice balance here of warm and cool. If you didn't know, low output impedance basically ensures consistency across multiple different headphone impedance loads, so it is very important, but I was really enjoying the G6's just shy of neutral sound. It definitely helps with a headphone like the SHP 9500 as it kind of tames that essiness down a little bit. It's not a night and day difference, but you will notice that the 9500s out of this thing don't sound as bright as they normally would. So a minimal amount of EQ is going to make that headphone really shine across the majority of tracks. I didn't find myself wanting to skip over tracks like I sometimes do with more neutral amps and DACs. So the G6 is very detailed, open, and crisp. Scalp Mode really helped to spread the sound out, creating some really nice air and spacing. Great for films and gaming, obviously. In fact, I listened to this thing so much that it kind of delayed this review because I just didn't want to leave my couch. If you're familiar with trophies in the PS4, I actually unlocked the trophy for Uncharted 2, which basically means that I won all of the trophies. I also noticed in Fallout 4, for as much flack as they've got over the years for some questionable business-like decisions, they really get a lot of things right in their games, notably sound. Their sound design is just really immaculate. But, of course, the G6 really just magnifies that, helps a lot with that, in that you're able to just hear so much going on, even more so than a typical amp DAC would provide, and especially with Scalp Mode on. So previously I've been listening a lot with the K5 Pro, but I found that this baby is just, it's more convenient, first of all. So when I transport it from my living room to my studio and vice versa, all I have to do is basically unplug it and plug it back in, and that's it. With the K5 Pro, I have to unplug the optical cable, and then I have to rewire the separate power brick when I put it back in my room. So kind of a hassle. And then of course, when I'm in my room, I also have to re-plug the USB cable, whereas with the PS4, that's not required. All that's really required is the optical cable, but it's just more of a hassle than the G6. The G6 takes about 20 seconds to transport, and I'm listening to music or gaming very quickly. So it's just an incredibly immersive experience. So for film, 2 films in particular, well 3 now, that stood out. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. There's a very emotional moment at the end. I was reduced to tears listening through this thing, and I'm not gonna like chalk it up to the amp. Most of it had to do with just the movie itself. It's just very emotional, but it just took on a more intimate quality. It's almost like when you use this thing, you're transported to a different world. Everything kind of gets blocked out, and you're so hyper focused on the movie that nothing else really matters. And so for the second movie, and watching The Talented Mr. Ripley, the tension and suspense in that movie is just so palpable and heightened that, like, with this thing, that it kind of brings it out even more, to where you're hyper focused and zoned in on really subtle details and things that are going on to your right and left, and back of you, below you, above you. I would say that height is a little bit more rare and uncommon than left and right and down, but I think that has a lot to do with the headphones. So I was listening with the K702 and K612. Now the third movie I was watching last night, again, one of my favorite movies of all time. You guys know I meme this one a lot, No Country for Old Men. There was a moment early on in the movie where there was like a knock, like a loud sound. I could have sworn it was coming from above me and to the back. So directional cues, especially directional cues, are spot on with it. just a really nice out of your head feeling. A lot of audiophiles, like true audiophile snobs, swear by speakers and they kind of scoff at people who listen with headphones. And but I would say that a headphone like the 612 or 702 paired with this, it really does rival speakers in a way. I mean, there's not really truly nothing like a 5.1 surround sound system, but I'm finding myself more shocked and like on my toes when I'm listening with headphones, because there's just it just provides a really grand experience. So now we'll get into some quick comparisons. Now keep in mind what we discussed earlier with regard to output impedance, and you'll see some concrete numbers here in a second, but I have 7 amps and DACs on my desk, and I found that the differences between them all were very, very subtle. So first up, G6 versus Hip Tack. The Hip Tack, I felt like it had a little bit more meat on its bones. It's definitely a little bit of a warmer sound, but it's kind of slight. I mean, I would say the difference between these two manifested a little bit more than the differences between the others. Like there was a little bit more of a difference. I felt like the G6 had a more airy presentation. The Hip Tack wants you to enjoy the music more, whereas the G6 tends to be a little bit more analytical, but still very, very similar sounding amps. G6 versus DF Red, very, very similar, almost identical. I went back and forth quite a bit with this one because I was surprised to find that they did sound very, very much alike. If the Hip was a smidgen warmer than the G6, the Dragonfly may be a tad more open and airy, and this is pretty much consensus. The Dragonfly Red is very open and airy sounding, but I was very surprised to find the G6 and it sounded pretty similar. The DF Red has an output impedance of less than 1, so I would pit it somewhere in the middle, maybe 0.5 to 0.7. But yeah, that gives you kind of a good idea. The G6 versus the E10K. The E10K may be slightly cleaner, more crisp, and a tad more neutral. So on Emily Rhodes' Pinball, her voice sounded a little bit more sterile, a little bit more forward, and a tad bit more abrasive on the E10K, which echoes sentiments from past comparisons to the E10K. The E10K, though it's a fantastic amp DAC on its own, when you put it up against other amps and DACs, you do get a slightly grainy / abrasive feel, but it's very, very subtle. Again, very subtle. So G6 versus K3. The sound is more alike here because the K3 sound is more polished than the E10K now. Definitely was reinforced here as I listened again. I haven't listened to the K3 in a while, but if the E10K had a hint of grain, the K3 definitely cleans that up. Still very similar, the difference between the G6 and the K3. Why? Because the output impedance is almost identical. So for the K3 it is 1.04, for the G6 it's 1. So, well, not identical, but very similar sounding. So G6 versus K5 Pro. The K5 Pro is a tad warmer. Definitely still not as warm as some people make it out to be. It's definitely a little bit warmer and a little bit more smoothed over, but the difference is really very, very subtle again. It's a little bit more relaxed, more laid back. It has that sort of eyes glazed over when you're high as a kite feel. Again, the output impedance here is also very similar. G6 is 1, K5 Pro is 1.2, so that definitely contributes to why it's just a smidgen more warm and smoothed over, but again, very, very subtle. Very, very similar sounding amps. So lastly, G6 versus Zen. The Zen has an output impedance of less than 1. Like the Fly, there's not a official number, but I would say the Zen is slightly crisper. At first I thought the G6 was, but as I went back and forth more and more, there was one track in particular that kind of gave it away. But again, very minuscule, like almost unintelligible. Like you're not going to be able to really perceive it unless you're, going back and forth quite a bit, which I did. The G6 was just a little bit warmer, slightly hazier sounding. But yeah, I mean, this comparison just further reinforced and cemented the notion that DACs are incredibly overrated. Now, I just spent, 20-25 minutes telling you how great the G6 is, and it is, but when you're choosing an amp DAC, I would worry less about like how it sounds in relation to another DAC and just focus on what you're going to be using it for. So a couple of things I would have liked to see in this amp DAC is an on-off switch. So when I'm about to go to bed at night and I have it on my desk, I'd rather just flick a switch instead of unplug it. It's a very minor nitpick, but could have used an on-off. Another thing I would have liked to see is a 3.5mm interconnect, as this thing has 2 line jacks on the back, an input and an output, so I don't understand why they couldn't have supplied some sort of 3.5mm cable. Now they do have a hybrid line optical, but you're not going to be able to use that for anything really but optical out of your Xbox. So, and lastly, a little bit more of a robust build. I mean, it feels pretty good in your hand, but it could have been, like, I was expecting it to be a little bit heavier, and I wasn't disappointed, but it's a little bit underwhelming when you hold it in your hand. But so lastly, just a really quick comparison between the G6 and G5. Now, keep in mind, I have not demoed the G5, but I came across something online from Creative's website that goes into just the bare essential similarities and differences. The G6 supports PC, PS4, your Xbox One, and Switch, while the G5 only supports PS4, your PC, and an Xbox. I'm not sure if they meant just a regular Xbox, but with the G6 they put Xbox One, so I don't really know. I think one of you guys could comment on that. But so secondly, the G6 has a 130 dynamic noise reduction rating, whereas the G5 only has 120. Kind of a subtle difference there. The G6 does have the X-Amp feature, which I mentioned before, but the G5 does not. Another main difference is the G6 has an output impedance of 1, whereas the G5's is 2.2, so considerably, probably, if I had to guess, warmer than the G6 or any of the other amps that we talked about today. And lastly, the G6 supports 32-bit 384K, as I mentioned, whereas the G5 only supports 24 and up to 192. Keep in mind, it doesn't really matter in practice, but still should be noted nonetheless. Now, final word. So I would say if you're a gamer, avid film buff, go with the G6, as it's the gamer's choice. It's more convenient. You can transport it around a lot easier, and it's just, I found myself using it more so than I did my K5 Pro. And yeah, so if you want to use something with your turntable, your home theater type stuff, preamp into speakers and monitors, definitely go with the K5 Pro. Also go with the K5 if you're gonna not be moving it around as much. I plan to use my K5 in my home theater and just keep it there, whereas with the G6 I can just like move it around as need be. The K5 Pro is a tad warmer, but again, that's not really a big deal. That's about it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review / discussion. Leave me some love down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. If you like what I do here and you want to support the channel, hit that Patreon link down below. Yeah. And last but not least, don't forget to ask me about my grandchildren, yeah? Yeah. 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 For all the fake rappers out there. Check. Yeah. Smokey Robinson, one time. Yeah. Old school, man. Esoteric Eric. Yeah. Who's that? Check it. Check. Who is it? Yeah. It's Stu Black, here I am with the review once again. By this point you gotta know I'm deadly with the pen. You wanna battle me? I'll gladly take the win. You whip a caddy, but it's wrecked. I'm rolling fatties and I'm spent. Call me Lassie, I'm legit. I saved the day, but I'm no fever pitch. I'm kinda sick, I spit retarded. I'm autistic and it fits. I'm like a kid on Christmas morning. It's a cinch, you overthinking it again. I'm dropping wisdom in a pinch. I know you listening to this, cause I be ripping it to bits. I get the gabbing, I'm on my I'm popping red pills and I'm rich. I'll make you quiver with my lips. I'll make you shiver with my stanzas. It's a hit like Sinatra in the mob. I come equipped a little bit like Tech 9. I keep it lit, a fire sign. I'm dangerous, out of control. I majored and I play to win. Do me a favor and just quit.
I waited for like 15 minutes for this to mow the lawn, and now he's blowing. I'm actually like super pissed off right now. It's like Leatherface with the leaf blower preset, and I just spit everywhere.
I'm gonna wait.
No, sorry, we're going streaking through the quad and into the gymnasium. Come on, everybody! Come on, Snoop a loop, Snoop. No, it's cool. I'm cool. Bring your green hat. Let's go.